Good evening, everyone. We will begin in 2 minutes. If I could ask all trustees to have a seat, please. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to this public meeting of the Peel District School Board. As you are able, please stand with us for the land acknowledgement and our national anthem.
We would like to acknowledge
that we are here today
on the traditional territory
of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation.
Nous tenons à reconnaître que nous sommes sur le territoire traditionnel
des Mississaugas de la
Première Nation de Credit.
Thank you, everyone. Just before we approve the agenda, I would like to let everyone know here that normally these seats are all full of superintendent and senior team members, but those who are not here are away making important phone calls to inform those who have been successful through promotion process that they have done so. So we are respectful that they are not here, but we would want you to know that normally they are. With respect to approval of the agenda, which is item 1, we have some amendments to our agenda. Trustees would have the blue sheet in front of them identifying 3 additions. 6.1A is retirements addendum. 9.4 is an appointment of student trustees for the 2019-2020 school year. And 13.1 is a copy of a letter to the Minister of Education from the chair of the Avon-Maitland District School Board. Trustee Marchant, will you move the agenda as amended? Thank you. Trustee Sohi, will you second this? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? All in favor of the amended agenda? Can we see some hands, please? We need 2/3 on this. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Item 1.1 that's carried. Item 1.1 is a special presentation by Allen Drive Middle School students with a scene from their musical Grease. We are lucky to have students and staff from Allen Drive Middle School here this evening for a special presentation. On May 8th and 9th, the students will be performing the musical Grease at their school. The show begins at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10 and are available at the door. That's a very cheap plug, but maybe we would want to go to. Tonight, they will be performing 3 songs. Freddie, My Love, sung by Sabrina Oliveira, who plays Marty. Look at Me, I'm Sandra D, sung by Melinda Barker, who plays Rizzo. And We Go Together, sung by the Pink Ladies and Burger Palace Boys under the musical direction of Holly Carnegie. So before we welcome the students, there's been staff have encouraged trustees, if you would like to see the play from the front, we should go out to the public gallery to watch it from there, should that be our choice to do that. We have a fun approach at our board where we donate $2 every time any trustee says a school name. In this case, I said your name.
What do you say to a guy in the letter anyway?
Check, check.
I can pull that Sandra T routine, right, you guys? Look at me, I'm Sandra D. goddess of all purity. Won't be misled, trust my heart, use my head. I'm Sandra D. I don't lie or swear, I don't wrap my hair. I get ill at the sight of blood. Well, I don't care if you think I'm square. Fail in school, my name would be Mud. Oh, no, Salminio. I would never stoop so low. Please, you're cool now, you're starting to drool. You fool. I'm Sandra D.
I don't know if I'll go to the dance. Why not? I ain't got a date. Well, I have the perfect guy for ya. Right, you guys? Hey, Eugene!
Thank you to our amazing students at Allen Drive Middle School. I'll pay another $2, but they're from the Bolton area. And I didn't recognize that their principal Mrs. Hiscock was here as well, along with her vice principal, Mrs. Matthews. So we appreciate everybody's effort to help the kids get here and do their song and dance routine. We're moving on to item 2, trustees, a declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any? Seeing none. Moving to section 3, which is the minutes. Section 3.1 is the minutes of the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting on March 19th. 3.2 is the minutes of the Instructional Programs Curriculum Committee meeting on March 27th. 3.3 is a meeting of the Physical Planning and Building Committee on April 2nd. 3.4 is the minutes of the regular meeting of the board on April the 9th. Trustee Benjamin, will you put them on the floor? Thank you. Trustee Davies, will you second them? Thank you. They are here for our receipt and approval. Are there any questions or comments regarding any of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Are there any written questions from trustees? Seeing none, moving to item 5. Are there any notices of motion or petitions from trustees? Seeing none, moving to item 6, which is a special section for receipt. 6.1 is the list of retirements. 6.1A is the addendum to retirements. 6.2 is Police Appreciation Week, which is May 13th to the 17th. 6.3 is Peel IT Support Staff and Media Support Services Appreciation Day on May the 15th. Trustee Davies, will you move this section? Thank you. Trustee K. McDonald, will you second this? Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Trustee K. McDonald?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I just wanted to, I was so saddened when I looked under the retirements and I noticed that Muriel Golding, who is a teaching assistant at Agnes Taylor Public School, was retiring. And I just wanted to publicly mention that she's going to be a great loss to the community. I knew her from when my now 20-year-old was at that school, and she has not wavered in her commitment to ensuring that all students are successful. So I know it's going to be a big loss to that community. Also, I was happy to see that it's Police Appreciation Week, May 13th to 17th, as I think it's important for all our partners to be celebrated and our police officers to be recognized for the work they do in the community. So I just wanted to comment on those things.
Excellent, thank you. It's a happy, sad day when we celebrate retirements, isn't it? Because we're happy for them, but we're sad for us that they are leaving. And thank you for your comment about Police Appreciation Week. Are there any other comments? Or is Trustee Chankrian?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, I just wanted to reflect the sentiments made by Trustee K. McDonald. I myself, as Trustee McDonald knows, I went to Agnes Taylor, and that is where Ms. Golding did have a lot of her career, and she did an amazing job at the school for the crazy amount of years that she was there for, and she was just a gem to the school, and it's just truly so bittersweet to see her leave. She did an amazing job at the school, and she had such a great impact on not only myself but the rest of the school community. And just for that, I just wanted to reflect the words just said by Trustee K. McDonald, and to wish her all the best.
Thank you. Are there any other? Yes, Trustee Green, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don't want to repeat the sentiments that my colleague acknowledged this champion of education and police, but our police week, the appreciation week that is coming up. But I also want to recognize the Peel IT support staff and the media support. Their appreciation day is May the 15th, and I would like to really echo a big thanks, because a system like our system here in the board, we need IT staff to keep everything running and moving, and for the success of the work that we do. And I want to, just say thank you for the work that you do day in and day out to keep our system going. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Thank you, everyone. So this has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Item 9, Moving to item 9, new business. We need to take these items separately. 9.1 are the recommendations of the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting on March 19th. There are no recommendations for the board. They are information items here for receipt. Vice Chair Lawton, will you move these minutes? I will. Thank you. Trustee Marchand, will you second them? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. 9.2 are the recommendations of the Instructional Programs Curriculum Committee meeting on March 27th. Again, there are no recommendations for the board, and they are information items here for our receipt. Trustee K. McDonald, will you move these minutes, please? Thank you. And Trustee Crocker, will you second this? Thanks. Are there any questions or comments from trustees on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. 9.4 is the appointment of our student trustees for the 2019-2020 school year. We have asked our current student trustees to introduce next year's student representatives. We'll start in the South. Trustee Oris Nadenova, will you introduce our next year representative, please? And I will activate your microphone now.
Absolutely. Thank you through you, Chair. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you the Student Trustee South for the 2019-2020 school year, Kanisha Aurora. Kanisha is a grade 11 IB student at Glenforth Secondary School who takes great pride in empowering students. She takes a great interest in the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math field, being the constituency member of the current Minister of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, as well as organizing the largest student-run conference in Peel South. She's been inspired by many ministers of science and hopes to give back to her community by empowering the students of Peel. I have met her over the past year, and I know that she will do an amazing job representing the students of the 401, and I am incredibly proud of her recent achievement. Thank you.
Wow, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Kanisha, could you stand up, please? We will clap for you and welcome you. Thank you for joining us, Kanisha, and congratulations on winning this seat. In addition, I'd like to say that's probably the last time we'll call you by your first name, because when you're up here at this seat, we will call you Trustee Aurora. And welcome. Thank you for joining us. And Trustee Chankrian, representing the North.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, I am so very excited to announce Prableen Nar as a student trustee for the North for the 2019-2020 school year. Prableen Nar is a grade 11 student at Louise Arbor Secondary School who has a passion of serving her community and working with students. She has been involved inside and outside of the school and has been a member of many events and taken part in national theater drama festivals, as well as currently serving as a vice president in their school's student council. She's committed and dedicated towards everything she does and aims to bring positivity and success to students in Peel.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Prableen, will you stand up for us, please, so we could clap for you and welcome you. And thank you for competing for this position, and we look forward to working with you again at this table. You will be Trustee Nar in due time, but thank you and congratulations. Do either of you have family members with you? Could you ask them to stand up so we can recognize them as well, please? Thank you for bringing your amazing children to our board. Thank you again. Trustee B. McDonald, will you move this to the floor? Thank you. Trustee Green, will you second this? Thank you. And this is here for our receipt. All in favor? Carries. 9.5 is a notice of appointment of 2 trustees and 2 alternates to the OPSBA UPSPA Board of Directors from June 2019 to June 2020. Trustee Green, will you move this? Sure. Trustee Andrews, will you second this? Thank you. We will hear nominations and vote on these 4 positions at our next regular meeting of the board on Tuesday, May the 14th. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. 9.6 is the notice of motion from Trustee DeCroop regarding the book To Kill a Mockingbird. Trustee DeCroop, would you like to introduce your motion? Oh, sorry, this way. And you have a seconder?
I do. Kathy.
And who would that be?
Kathy.
Okay, that Trustee K. McDonald is the seconder. And thank you. Introduce your motion, please.
Thank you, Chair Cameron. I'm going to read the motion. I'm asking for a recorded vote for this, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be it resolved that the Peel District School Board recommend that the book titled To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, published in 1960, no longer be used as required teaching material or for the purpose of assessments. The Peel District School Board has now developed a record and a reputation for our commitment to equity and inclusion for all. The work this board is doing, especially around the We Rise Together initiative, has been an example of this exemplary commitment. However, this work would not be complete if we did not thoroughly examine the material we use in classrooms from an anti-oppressive and an anti-racist perspective. Recently, the Peel District School Board put out a directive about To Kill a Mockingbird specifically. That directive stated that this book can be harmful to some students because of racial undertones, the language that is used in the book, and the themes that are present. I'm going to read a couple of, and I think most trustees would have seen this. I'm going to read a couple of the items I highlighted from this directive. And I quote, "To Kill a Mockingbird uses the N-word more than 19 times. Though this is not the only way this novel is harmful, it does add to the violence of the book. The N-word is a derogatory word and has been used as a weapon against Black people for more than 100 years. This painfully poisonous word is linked to the violence and harm that has been used to relegate members of the Black community to subhuman status. To Kill a Mockingbird is but one of the texts that we read that incorporates the common white savior trope. To Kill a Mockingbird underscores the role of the central Black character as only a victim. For all the reasons above and so much more, there's a lot more reasons. I'm not going to read the entire thing. There's a lot more detail in here. Many members of the Black community detest the idea of their children having to read this novel. The idea that banning books is about censorship, and this is specifically something I'd like to stress. The idea that banning books is about censorship and that censorship limits free speech is often decried as a poor reason to keep the novels on schools' reading list, as its racist themes make it violent and oppressive for Black students. It goes on to talk about critical race theory and examples of what that means. You can go ahead and look for that information. I'm sure the administration will be able to provide that if you haven't read it. This directive significantly dropped the use of the book. This in itself is a very concerning fact. It really speaks to the fact that most of our teachers are not prepared to teach this book from an anti-oppressive perspective. Sorry, I failed to mention that the directive says that if the book is going to be used, it needs to be taught from an anti-oppressive perspective, and there needs to be conversations about race relations involved in that teaching. But if there's a book that we are teaching or using as teaching material, and we have to provide a guidebook on how to teach this book, that in itself is concerning. It's also, like I mentioned, concerning that once this information was out there and once there was a guidebook on how to teach a book, all of a sudden, the rate that this book is being used drops significantly. And it's because teachers have decided that they did not want to be a part of that or did not feel prepared for those conversations, whatever. I can't really speculate, but it is concerning. This motion does not ask for banning books. This isn't about that. This is a democracy. The book is always going to be around. It's going to be on the shelves in libraries. People will always be able to read it. There are many, many, many books out there that are part of libraries and part of, available at chapters and available at different places that we don't teach or we don't use in schools, simply because they're inappropriate. I can name a few, but I'm not going to. This motion is recommending that this book, which may be harmful to some students, as identified by our own administration and our own work, that it not be used as a required teaching material. This is about clarifying and solidifying our position on this topic once and for all. And I know that there are many classes or many places where there are reading lists, and the book is only one of the options that are on the reading list. But that is not the case in every school. There are places where this book does still get assigned as mandatory teaching, and there are no rules to say that you can't do that. There are no rules that say that you have to have a reading list. So that's another concern. This book is often described as a classic. Many things are. But the world is constantly changing. And our role in the education sector is to prepare students for their future. And we are not preparing them for the 1930s. And I'm happy to address concerns later.
Thank you. We'll now open for debate. If you would like to have your 5 minutes to engage, please activate your speaker and we will get to you in order. Trustee Marchant.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. My original thought tonight when this was coming up was actually to ask whether it was appropriate for us to be discussing specific books at all, whether or not that was the role of the board. I went through both the Education Act and our own bylaws and our own policies, and nowhere could I find any reference for trustees to have a say in the specific reading materials of the school board. It talks about us overseeing and creating an atmosphere in which each of our students can grow and in which our teachers can exercise their professional judgment to the best of their ability and to support them in the choices they make for our students in consultation with our students, who I think are an important voice missing here, and of course the parents. I took the liberty of talking to our staff and was assured that if any student, or parent for that matter, has concerns with any reading material, be it To Kill a Mockingbird or other book, and after discussion with their teacher and with the principal, that a suitable alternative would be found for them for the purposes of the coursework. My trustee talks about looking at an anti-discriminatory lens and putting this in perspective. If we don't have materials that challenge that perspective, how are we to bring that lens to bear on it and teach our students how to have a full view of both historical and current affairs on what is going on? Discrimination is a very real thing. If we don't have some very real examples of it and able to have those open, mature discussions, which I think our students are fully capable of, I'm not sure how they're supposed to learn this. As Trustee DeCreux pointed out, these books and materials are available everywhere, and much worse than that everywhere. And if we don't invite these materials in to the classroom to have those discussions, then how are they supposed to learn how to make the right judgments and how to decide what is and isn't right? We have lots of avenues for parents to have involvement into the school. Thankfully, we have strong student trustees who are able to bring their voice, and I'm sure will bring their voice to this matter tonight as well. We have laws in Canada that talk to hate speech and pornography, so there are hard limits for what can come into a school. Outside of that, there are other discretions there. We hire professional teachers who have a background in many years of teaching students at the grade levels. We as trustees don't necessarily come with that background. I know there are some teachers and educators up here. There's some people with policy backgrounds. There's people of faith backgrounds. But that doesn't make us the judge and jury and censors. That's not what we are elected to do. It's not what the Education Act says we should do. And it's not what our own policies say we should do. So to that end, I cannot support this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Davies?
I definitely agree with what Mr. Marchant said, but from a personal point of view, there's a couple of things here. I was known for not cracking a book in high school, always searching out the movie, and this is an incredible movie, guys, and it made me read the book. And also I grew up in Scarborough, where we had a very diverse population, And this book really did help and heal. It absolutely did. And so I cannot support this motion. And I hope that my children read this book because they're coming up to that age in high school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe my duty as a trustee, if you look in the Education Act, the government told me that as a trustee, I'm responsible for student achievement. Now, every student have a right within our board to feel safe and included in the environment that they're learning in. And if our students are saying to us, this particular book affects how I learn, it's affect my mental health and how I learn and how I achieve, we need to listen. This board is all about student achievement. Everything that we do, staff, even when we interview staff, they end it with it's all about student achievement. And if we have something within inside our system that is preventing student from succeeding and achieving their goals, in particular Black students, then we need to listen and we need to make sure that we are taking the necessary steps to ensure that these students are able to succeed and achieve just like any other students. I believe as part of the We Rise group that I co-chair, we have heard from the student themselves who came and present to us. We listened and we heard. We also have one of the greatest researchers in Ontario, Dr. Carl James, who's working with us. And I remember one of his statements, it said, if we have something in place that can harm to even one child, then we need to take a deeper look at how we are addressing whatever the root cause of causing the harm to that one child. And we're all about no child left behind. Now, I would say to my colleagues tonight, I cannot tell you how to vote or how to support this motion, but I will definitely ask you. And I would say to you, you will not, if I sit here, I have worked with some of you for 15 years, 16 years, have worked with some of you for 8 years and 4 years. But until you live in my shoes, until you live my experience, I can tell you about my experience, but you will never have the full impact of that experience that I have grown up in school here in Toronto, moving into Peel and being a trustee. You can never understand what certain thing does to a person when things start to affect their mental ability to learn. You cannot, that's something that is untransferable. So I am saying to you today that we heard from students, we heard from parents, we heard from our own staff. And it's time we always strive ourselves and listening. We said this is a board that listens. Tonight, I'm asking you to listen to our parents, to our staff, and our students, and make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee B. McDonald. Thank you, David. I'm sorry. Let's try again. Nope. Press your button. Should be active.
Ah, it had to be pushed in. Someone pulled it out. So, before I start, can I raise your hands? Who's read this book? You know? Good. This book, if you haven't read it, for the people who aren't here and probably listen to the audio, is a story told in the Depression in the 30s in Alabama, which I visited through my work career, through the eyes of 11-year-old daughter, Scout Finch, which is important, and I'll talk about later. Her father, Atticus, is a lawyer who defends a wrongly accused person and rises up with his daughter and son to stand up directly to racism and injustice. The book considered #1 must-read in America. Atticus is quoted as the most enduring fictional image of racial heroism. So when this book came out, it was considered too much because of the rape and violence, and people were thinking of banning it at the time because it was released in the 60s. Funny now that those same topics you can turn on the TV at 3 o'clock and Crime Special Victims Unit and watch even worse type of thing. But today, we're here because someone wants to pass a motion to ban the book from being used in our classroom. Last month, I asked my 2 boys what they thought of the book, since they both read it in school, including me, and also watching that great movie with Gregory Peck. They were shocked and couldn't understand what was the issue. And this is from my kid's perspective. My youngest raised a very important learning point of the book. He said the story was written through Scout's eyes, the young daughter, which connected the story to him. And he said, I saw how you have to stand up to racism and not be a bystander. It's the same message we tell about bullying. We do not stand by. We have to stand up. That racial equity lens that we talk about in Peel when you read this book, it gives perspective that everyone understands that we cannot watch racism. You cannot stand by. You have to stand up and say no. No matter if you're outnumbered, no matter how small Scout was when she faced that mob in that book. That is the learning my son got from this. And that's what everyone we want to get from this. So why would we take this off any recommendation list for people to learn about standing up against racism? Now, I understand your perspective, and like when my kids were reading books, they were given a choice of books. So anyone who feels offended about a book has an opportunity to try another book. But this book has a message to people, and I think it's very important. It truly fascinates me to even consider banning a book over a word. This would be interesting because we'd have to go through our library as a book, removing Huckleberry Finn, Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. And if some of you are old like me, you watched The Roots by Alex Haley, those books would be removed. If you took everyone's student's phone and listened to their music, you would probably have to ban their music from their phone because of words. That's not what we are. That's not the policing role that I heard Trustee Martian talk about. We have to teach more than that. You know, I grew up in a small town in Lunenburg, very monoculture as I call it. And, you know, when I mentioned this to my son about, you know, this book or this banning of words and books and stuff, he just couldn't believe it. But for me, this book meant a lot because I never saw any kind of racism until I watched the movie, until I read the book. So, to summarize, this motion, when you boil it down to, sorry to say, it's banning a book. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, both fought against the fascism that included burning books and trying to rewrite history. And that's not what we're apart. So to support this motion goes against democracy, and everything that we come from it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Trustee Oris Nadenova.
Thank you, through you, Chair.
He didn't re-engage. Excuse me for 1 second. Trustee Crocker, were you wanting to get in? I'm sorry I disengaged you.
Yeah, I did.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Trustee Nadenova, are you on? Oris Nadenova, sorry. Yes.
Not a problem. Thank you, through you, Chair. On behalf of the students of Peel, myself and student trustee Chongkrian will be voting against this motion. We recently released a survey asking students how they felt about this, and just around 70% of them said that they were opposed, many of them raising very valid reasons. The first one being that it was a classic novel that many of them actually enjoyed reading. Something else that they brought up was that Black students to this day still face discrimination, and we can't just dismiss the fact that this book was written in the 30s and say that there is no prejudice existing in the world today, because as you can see, it's still a very prevalent issue. And just to say that even though this happened in the 30s, it doesn't exist today, we should definitely still be making sure that students are aware that this is happening, because it is through this method that we'll be able to address it and then be able to solve it. Again, if we teach this book in a culturally sensitive lens, this can be incredibly constructive. And something else that education is so important for students is that it teaches them to think through a critical lens. So if we want our students to be successful, we need to make sure that they have the critical thinking skills to go into the future, to be able to analyze any piece of texts, to make sure what resonates with them, but also how it benefits the rest of society. In addition to this, students also mentioned that it set an interesting precedent for future censorship, because once we decide that this book should not be necessary for assessments, where do we stop at banning other books? So this is a couple of points that it mentioned, in addition to them enjoying reading it, but of course we do value that our students should always have the option to opt out if it makes any of them uncomfortable, and we should always be putting our students' mental health first, and we do feel that if they wanted to, then they shouldn't have to read the book, but we do feel that by banning it altogether, or by making sure that it is not necessary for assessment or as a necessary reading material, we find that it should be available for students to be able to take this opportunity and to learn it, which is why collectively student trustee Chongkrian and I will be voting against this motion on behalf of the Students' Appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Chongkrian.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, Trustee Oris Nadenova and I released a survey, as she's just mentioned, asking all of our students if they are in favor or opposed to this motion and to justify their answers. Trustee Oris Nadenova has spoken on this motion, and we wanted to share the following comment made by a student who took part in the survey. This book is a piece of history. Yes, it features language that should not be used today, but it is to dishonor justice if we were to say that the language used was never utilized to harm certain marginalized groups. On behalf of Peel North, and with the best interests of our constituents at heart, we believe that by censoring this material, we lose the opportunity to educate our children about institutionalized racism, something that is extremely important in today's society. With education, we will be able to eradicate these barriers created in society through these differences, again, by educating our students. For these reasons, we will not be in support of this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Crocker.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking in opposition to banning To Kill a Mockingbird or any other book, and I acknowledge while the word ban is not in the motion, were this motion to pass, it would be reported as a book ban. We are indeed being asked to ban a book for instructional purposes. Now, this is not to say that we shouldn't use discretion in determining material suitable for study. That discretion already exists in Peel schools. Our English teachers know what they're doing, and they're capably led. The Board of Trustees must trust the professional judgment of our teachers and school administrators. Book banning is unnecessary and undemocratic. As to banning this book in particular, I read To Kill a Mockingbird recently, and I'd like to think that I did so through a critical anti-oppression lens, and I found there's much to be learned from the book. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, Chair, if I may. A quote, when you get into page 39, Atticus says, "If you can learn a simple trick, you'll get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. By the way, that was quoted by Barack Obama in his farewell speech in 2017. I read a little further. I got to page 59 and I found something that made me uncomfortable. Foot washers believe anything that's pleasure is a sin. Did you know some of them came out of the woods one Saturday and passed by this place and told me and my flowers were going to hell? Your flowers too? Yes, ma'am. They'd burn right with me. They thought I spent too much time in God's outdoors and not enough time inside the house reading the Bible. So much for outdoor education. So, apparently To Kill a Mockingbird makes some people feel uncomfortable. I get that. But not every novel is a feel-good story. Good literature is meant to provoke a reaction. There are book banners who object to the N-word. I get that too. I would hope that we all object to it. Reading or teaching any book does not signal approval of its language or attitudes. When we study Macbeth or Julius Caesar, we don't do so with a view to encouraging assassination as a means to political change. Like the history texts we use in schools, English literature is full of war, slavery, plagues, genocide, stories of gender, racial, and class inequality abound, which is not to say this is how we expect future generations will act. Rather, we seek to understand, and one would hope find more generous and peaceful solutions to our problems. In the past year, the Peel District School Board has expended considerable human and financial resources on culturally responsive pedagogy training, ensuring that every high school English head and anyone else who might want to teach To Kill a Mockingbird would do so through that critical anti-oppression lens. So the board has responded appropriately to families' concerns about the book. And Chair, as long as I've known about it, going back to the 70s when I taught my first English classes, it was always the custom to offer students alternate readings if a family objected to a book. And it's the policy of Peel schools today. Voice and choice, yeah? One would hope that, after an informed discussion with their teachers and school administrators, families would make the right choice. We're not all experts on English literature. President Barack Obama and Mrs. Obama may or may not be English literature experts either, but they could teach most of us a thing or two about race relations in the 21st century. And here's what they had to say about To Kill a Mockingbird in 2016. When Harper Lee sat down to write To Kill a Mockingbird, she wasn't seeking awards or fame. She was a country girl who just wanted to tell an honest story about life as she saw it. But what that one story did, more powerfully than 100 speeches possibly could, was change the way we saw each other, and then the way we saw ourselves. Through the uncorrupted eyes of a child, she showed us the beautiful complexity of our common humanity and the importance of striving for justice in our own lives, our communities, and our country. The Obamas went on to ask us to keep telling this timeless American story to our students, to our neighbors, and to our children, and to constantly try in our own lives to finally see each other. I will end with this, and I'm not at 5 minutes. I've had the clock on everybody here, Chair. If you Google banned books, you'll find plenty of action. The Goodreads entry, for example, puts To Kill a Mockingbird at the top of the list, followed in short order by a slew of Harry Potter books. Harry Potter, who inspired an entire generation of otherwise reluctant readers. Also in the top 50 are Diary of Anne Frank. I mean, really? Shel Silverstein's beautiful story, The Giving Tree. Oh, and some of Steinbeck's best, including Of Mice and Men, about which one of my students said, "Sir, this is the best book I've ever read. In fact, it's the only book I ever read." I hope that he was stirred to read more great books, To Kill a Mockingbird included, whatever the book banners may say. Aspiring book banners have plenty of company. Let's make sure that the Peel Board is not among them. I ask my fellow trustees to stand with me against this motion.
Thank you. Are there any other trustees who would like to speak who have not yet spoken? Thank you, Trustee Sohi.
To you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure, actually asking a question to our curriculum head, that there is an option. So if this book makes few people uncomfortable and they don't want to read it, there is an option given to those. It's not a mandatory.
Yes, Superintendent Graham. Thank you.
The answer is yes.
Yeah. So if we are already giving an option to our students, if in case they don't want to read it, I think we have already done our due diligence, and I will be voting against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Benjamin?
Am I right? Through you, Chair, I just wanted to bring up the point which Trustee Sohi brought up, that out of the choice of 20 books is given to students, and they, with their teacher, decide which book they should read or study. So it's not that it is imposed on the students, they make a choice. And as already pointed out by Trustee Marchand, if any student or parent is against it, there's always the option of discussing and, between the parents and the students and the teacher, and opting for another book. So it is not mandatory that this book is imposed or it has to be studied. And the other point that I, after my, inquiries made was, as of now, only 7 schools are teaching this book. So it varies, it is not imposed, and there is a choice given to the students, and I will not support this motion.
Thank you. Any other trustees who have not spoken who would like to speak? I'm sorry? Now it's activated.
Oh, you didn't.
There you go.
You didn't get it before. Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair Cameron. So for this book, I don't think first of all, this is not our job. This is not a governance issue to tell curriculum how to do their jobs. We're telling English departments, English heads, and curriculum experts that we are not in agreement with what they decide or how they do their job. And I will say too that my 2 daughters read this book, and it's one of the books in high school that really stood out for them. The lessons that were learned from this book, and it's a book that, that they'll never forget, and it stands out in their minds for many, many reasons, many good reasons. And again, this book is not being pushed on anybody, and nobody's being made to read it. It's an absolute choice, and that if anybody has, issue with it, as been said, they can go to the school, and they do not have to participate in reading this book. So for that reason, or those reasons, I'll be voting against this motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee K. McDonald?
Excuse me, just before I say what I'm going to say, I just want to ask Superintendent Adrian the question again, because I'm confused. So currently, every single school within the Peel board that are teaching the Killer Mockingbird, the children have an option to not teach it. It's not mandatory. So if a teacher brings in a book for assessment purposes, right, it doesn't have to be mandatory.
Superintendent Graham?
Correct. So if a book is brought in to be a class novel read by the class, and a student and or parent had a concern with that book, they would have the option to ask for an alternative book to read.
And is that in the policy? Or is that up to because in my research, and looking on the Ed Act, I would thought it was up to the teachers to, if they wanted to do so, to the teacher's purview to decide which book is taught.
So the teacher can decide what the class novel will be, but as I said, if a student or a parent had a concern with the book, they'd have the right to ask to read an alternative novel. One of the things that we're actually promoting right now in the curriculum department with our English departments is actually moving away from whole class novels and promoting voice and choice in novels with students. So not having the whole class and having a number of books for students to choose from. So that alone there is a precedent there that students would get a choice in class. So once again, if there was a whole class novel and a student had an issue with it, they would have the option to ask for something alternative to read.
Okay, thank you. So I was listening to all my colleagues around the table, and I just wanted to start with a quote. One must note, and this comes from the directive that was given to teachers, one must note, however, that Black people rarely have the luxury of deciding when they will be targets of hatred, bigotry, and racism, and must deal with it when it shows up without any warning. The use of racist texts as entry points into discussions about racism is hardly for the benefit of Black students who already experience racism. This should give us pause. Who do the use of the text center? Who does it serve? Why do we continue to teach them? Our board has always been a leader in the area of equity. Our director recently commented and said, we'll create an educational opportunity, and he goes on to say, with the goals of addressing the hurt and harm caused, fostering a climate in which no student feels marginalized or targeted because of their identity. Tony Pontus said, yes, we'll be criticized, yes, we'll be questioned, and yes, we'll be judged, and yes, we'll be uncomfortable, but we'll be unflinching in our findings. So regardless of what headlines would show, because even we have went through HPE, we survived the media attack with the PER issues, and invariably what happens in the board meeting, the headline didn't match the headlines, but it never stopped our board before. I do not support censorship, and I think it's disingenuous to think that this motion is asking anyone to ban a book. This motion is not in any way asking to ban a book. Just like as a board, we could not support students perpetuating lies, stereotypes, or misinformation about any group. We should not support the teaching of a text, the mandatory teaching of a text for assessment that students find harmful and hurtful. This motion is not saying ban the book. It's merely saying not to be used as required teaching. There are many schools where To Kill a Mockingbird, and I thought that it was not optional. We are not elected to be jurors, but we are elected to ensure that all students feel safe and included. I am happy that my colleague, Trustee Davies, you saw the movie for the first time and it turned you on to reading. This motion will not prevent you from doing this again, or your children from doing that. And I'm happy for colleagues whose children had fond memories of it. I too read the book. However, as a Black mother with 4 beautiful Black children, I have stared the ugly barrel of racism. To Kill a Mockingbird did not eradicate racism. It has been around for 1930. I have heard trustees say, if a motion is good, even for one kid, she'll support it. I'm disappointed that she has stated that she will not be supporting this motion because there are more than one case within this board who have come before us in the We Rise panel and say how harmful and hurtful this book is to them. This board prides itself on being respectful to vulnerable students. What about the board respected to all vulnerable students? This book, have different reactions to different people. The Ontario English curriculum has several requirements and expectations for students. It identifies key information, asks critical questions, and according to the Ontario curriculum, it's the teacher's purview to decide which book to teach. That's what the Ontario curriculum says. The teacher has autonomy, but when texts come with hurt and harm, it's unfair to some kids. If while kids are reading and a kid feels the book is negative and harmful to them, students want to be at their best. And Peel, we have a history of doing what's right for students. We know in advance that students respond negatively to this book, so why do we continue to use this book? I'm glad that Trustee Brad McDonald's son learned the importance of standing up to bullying. Has this cured bullying? No, it hasn't. Has this cured all forms of racism? No, it hasn't. At this board, we're renowned for taking into account the feeling of the most vulnerable. I think that the trigger for one group of people may be different than the trigger for another group of people. And it's interesting to note whose children are not triggered by this book. And when we hear the people that come before us that are triggered by this book. So let us be clear and not use smoke screens about this banning books. This motion simply asks that no longer should Kill a Mockingbird be used as required teaching material for the purpose of assessments. Don't ban a book. Don't make it mandatory. That's what they're asking. Sorry. And you said it was commented too that students have the opportunity to read and learn from it. Yes, but there are many other texts that we can use that are not as harmful, and we're talking about the vulnerable students that have come forward to it. So I understand the importance for some people and the lessons that it teaches. However, this book has to date not eliminated racism. So if anywhere within our board that teachers are allowed to use this for purpose of assessment and is mandatory, I would like to ask my colleagues to reconsider and look at the wording of the motion, because I don't think she's trying to ban a book. Thank you.
Are there any other trustees wanting to speak who have not spoken? Seeing none, I'll call on Trustee DeCrube to close debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cameron. And thank you to all my colleagues who voiced their concerns and opinions. So I'm going to address some of those. It is absolutely disingenuous to make this issue about censorship or banning books. First of all, this board does not have the authority to ban or censor anything. That's what federal governments do. We do not have that kind of power around here. This is about what happens in classrooms contributing to or hindering student success, which is absolutely our responsibility. I'd like to echo Trustee Green's comments when he said we need to listen. We need to listen to students, the community, the academics who are involved in the work that we are doing around equity, maybe even the directive that we put out ourselves or our administration put out. Maybe we should listen to that too, or read it. Again, we need to listen. If we do not examine the work that is happening in the classrooms, we would be turning our backs from students and not listening. I know, and I've heard, many of you really like this book, and that's great. You can read it again and again and again on your own time. It does not need to be something that is assigned to a student in a classroom where it could cause harm and bring about feelings that don't need to be dealt with in a classroom setting. Enjoying reading a book is not more important than removing the potential harm that it causes and that it has caused to other students. There are no rules, and I understand that there's a lot of conversation about if it's mandatory, how does it work, we have reading lists, all that kind of thing. There are no rules right now, and I'd like Superintendent Graham to confirm that for me. There are no rules right now that say that it cannot be used as a mandatory required teaching. When I was in high school, we were assigned a book and everybody read it. That is the case. That could happen right now. Is that correct?
Trustee Graham, sorry, Superintendent Graham.
Through you, Chair, if I understand the question correctly, no. If a teacher said that a book was mandatory that had to be read in class, and a student and her parent came forward with a concern about reading that book, there would be an opportunity to choose a different book.
Absolutely, but they have to come forward.
Yes.
Do we know how hard it is to come forward? Has anybody around this board table ever had to come forward and ask for an accommodation? Anybody?
Yes.
Do you know how hard it is to come forward? No? Great. Good for you. This is about clarifying our position on this once and for all. This is about standing with our students and our community who have identified this as a source for potential harm. This isn't about banning books. Talking about that is completely disingenuous and quite sad, to be honest. And this isn't about governance or operational matters, because we are responsible for student success. This is simply about choosing to stand on the right side of history or not. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had concluding remarks from Trustee DeCroo. She has asked for a recorded vote. Just going to get the, is your microphone on, Marina?
Is it on now? Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Sure.
So I'm going to call for the vote now, trustees. All those in favor of the motion before us, now please stand.
Trustee Duckroop, Trustee Green, and Trustee McDonald.
Those opposed to the motion, please stand.
Trustees Marchant, B. McDonald, Sohi, Cameron, Lawton, Davies, Andrews, Benjamin, Crocker, Laura, and Amanpreet. So you have 9 votes in favor, 3 opposed.
No.
And, sorry? Sorry, 3 in favor, 9 opposed, I'm sorry, excuse me, and 2 non-binding votes. That is student trustee votes.
Thank you. Therefore, the motion fails. Thank you, trustees. Moving on to item 12 on the agenda, which is reports from Ontario Public School Boards Association. 12.1 is the OPSPA Connects report from April the 15th. Trustee Andrews, will you move these? Trustee Green, will you second them? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Item 13 is communications for action or receipt. There is the one communication we added at the beginning of the meeting to the agenda. This is 13.1, which is a copy of the letter to the Minister of Education from the Chair of the Avon-Maitland District School Board regarding recent announcements of changes to class sizes and mandated e-learning. Trustee Crocker, will you move receipt of this, please? Thank you. Trustee DeCroo, will you second this, please? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? All in favor? Carried. Item 15, are there any reports from trustee representatives on councils or associations? Seeing none?
Kathy,
oh.
do the report from Central West, please.
Trustee K. McDonald?
On, not Saturday gone, the April the 13th, we had the regional meeting of the Ontario Public School Board Association, and we got together with trustees in our region. It was a very productive meeting. We spoke about emerging issues within our board and different concerns to what's happening with regards to changes with the provincial government and how it would affect boards. Also, we spoke also about the fact that the government had suggested that they will be getting rid of Reg 274, or it is going to look different. And just about everybody was very excited about that, because just about all boards expressed their frustration that Reg 274 had, and the negative effect that it had on them. It was also suggested that we should, like, in communicating with the provincial government, when they do something that boards are happy with, that we should also, how we write to complain when things are happy, we could also write to thank them or encourage them in programs or initiatives that are in our favor. So that's something that boards we can think about. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Item 16, are there any comments or questions from board members? I'll start with our student trustees. Trustee Chonkrin, Trustee Oris Nadenova. Yes.
Thank you, through you, Chair. On a lighter note, I know that our student trustees left, but I'd just like to say that I'm incredibly excited to be mentoring them for the next couple of months before they start their term. I know that they are going to do an incredible job next year, and I'm all around very excited. Secondly, I'd also like to mention that a couple of schools in Peel South are having charity weeks. Our school, specifically Cancer Drive. I'm not going to say any school names because I don't have the money for that right now because I'm saving up. But oh, thank you. So yes, a couple of schools are having charity weeks, and I'd just like to say that although they are all during the same week, I'm pretty proud of all the school spirit that is being shown right now, and I'm thinking that it's an amazing time to show unity for a good cause for a certain charity, whether it be for a specific charity that a school chose, or to send kids to Camp for Cancer, which is what our school does. But I'm generally very proud of all the students in Peel South that are contributing to a wonderful cause. Thank you.
Thank you. So we would not charge you $2. For your pride in saying a school name here, we would want to hear that if you want to share it. Or go ahead, hit your button again, please. Trustee Davies will pay.
Woo, thank you. Next week, Clarkson Secondary School is having their cancer drive. Stephen Lewis is also having their charity week, and Lauren Park will also be having their charity week.
Wonderful.
So very excited for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Crocker.
Thank you, Chair. Just to bring the attention of trustees to April 28th, I did send you an email, but we discussed earlier that we have lots of email these days and it could be lost. So April 28th marks Canada's National Day of Mourning for workers who've been killed or who suffer work-related injury or disease. The ceremony is at the Milestones of Labour Monument on McLaughlin Road in Brampton, 10 o'clock Sunday coming. All the details are in your email. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Benjamin? Yes.
Through you, Chair, I just want to share some good news from one of the schools in my ward. Morning Star Middle School has some good news. Since January 7, grade 7 students called the Drama Llamas participated for the first time at the Destination Imagination STEAM-based competition. In the event called Improvisational Challenge, they won the silver medal in the provincial tournament and earned a spot to compete against teams from all over the world in the global finals in Kansas City, Missouri in May. The expenses for the trip, which include travel and accommodation, are going to be around $9,000, and it's being met by the school with substantial help by Superintendent Patricia Dawes, and also the parents are willing to chip in. So they still need to meet the traveling costs, and I hope they will be able to do it, and I wish them all the best, and that's all I have to share. Thank you.
That's wonderful news. It'll still cost you $2.
Yes, definitely.
I'm sure you.
I have to borrow.
We are Trustee Kay McDonald. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Well, since the last week I had last meeting, I've had a pretty rough 2 weeks. And I just wanted to publicly mention that, as you can see, I'm wearing this shirt to remember a principal that died suddenly on April the 13th. Mr. Lee was his name. And I can truly and honestly say that he is one of the best principals that I've ever come across in my entire life, as a student, as a parent, and as a trustee. And this has been a great loss to our board. To Mr. Lee, it didn't matter if you're in SciTech or if you're in a COM class, if you're in the DD class. It didn't matter what exceptionality you had, what disabilities you had. What mattered to Mr. Lee is that you were human. He saw potential in each student. He was one of the biggest cheerleaders for school I've ever seen. He even emailed me last year to make sure that I had nothing booked for May 20, 2020, because that was the 50th anniversary of his school. Mr. Lee has made me a better trustee, a better person, and I know nobody is indispensable or irreplaceable, but I think he's going to leave a gaping hole in our system for a while, and he'll be truly, truly missed. So I just want to publicly acknowledge this real equity champion, an educational champion in our board. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Carrie Andrews, no. Trustee Davies.
I just wanted to, Kathy, you mentioned that with the canceling of Bill 274, that we should write a letter to the education minister and consider, well, I'd like to consider it, guys, and I don't know what I need to do to get that going, because I'm a new trustee, but I really think if, you know, you're gonna scold someone when you don't like what they do, you should congratulate them when they do something you do like. It's part of being fair and equitable, and that's what this board stands for. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lawton. To order this side. Trustee DeCroop. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Cameron. Since we're talking about writing letters, I was wondering, did we ever receive a response to the letter that we wrote to the minister?
No.
At all?
No.
And it's been a few weeks. Usually they're pretty quick. I mean, previously they were quick. Okay. Should we send it again in case it got lost in the mail?
Or we could talk about sending another one, as opposed to an identical email to say we're following up. We just want to make sure that you received our email.
Yeah. And then maybe we can include, well, congratulations about 274. We're happy that you did that, but maybe respond to the rest of it. Good idea.
We'll talk about that.
Okay, let's talk about that.
I
Thank
think.
you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Trustee Marchant.
Yes, I'd just like to want to acknowledge the hard work of Trustee Crocker and thank him. I have 2 stop signs going in my neighborhood and near schools through his hard work on the safety board. And also thanks out to Councillor Stephen Dasco and everyone else. It was lots of people working at different levels, but I'd like to acknowledge Trustees Crocker's hard work and commitment on that committee for us. So thank you. And similarly, this one will cost me $2. I was at a wonderful fundraiser for Riverside School. One of the schools in my area that faces some financial difficulties, but the community came together and raised over $20,000 on Sunday towards buying equipment and proceeds for that school, which is really nice because they go in to celebrate 125 years next year. So some of the funds will go towards the school and celebrating that as well. So
Thank you for sharing that. Trustee B. McDonald.
Yeah, just on a lighter note, I think I should pass a motion to have the musical start every board meeting. That was very well done.
Okay, well, can we look at that another time? Thank you. Trustee Sohi?
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge on April 11th, Sandalwood Heights, in collaboration with the Parent Council and the Drug Awareness Society of Toronto, hosted an evening workshop for the students and the parents on the different topics. The main focus was on drug awareness, but also on the mental health and the social media. So this was the first time ever done in the Peel District School Board, that where the different nonprofit organization on the drugs came along with the parent council and did that kind of a workshop, which really engaged parents and the students. I'm looking forward to have these type of workshops in the other high schools in the area. Thank you.
Excellent. Do you have a toonie with you? Yes. Thank you. Trustee Green.
Thank you. And not to steal your echo, but it's been done before. Because I did it at Sir Winston with a lot of other school and services. So, okay. Anyway, just wanted to make a clarification in terms of when Trustee McDonald talked about writing a letter. It was a roundtable discussion in terms of how do we approach and build relationship with the ministry, because every school board, even the Ontario School Board Association and the Catholic School Board Association, the 4 different school board associations have been challenged in how we build relationship with this new government. And it was about when we were looking at OPSPR position paper, because OPSPR have a position paper with our priorities and goals. And we were discussing whether we would move forward with those priorities and how we continue to build relationship. And it was said that in terms of just presenting the position paper, when the government do something that we are in agreement with, that we should make sure that we outline that to the government, and that is to the meeting was the consensus from the regional meeting now is to take that to the board of directors, and at the board of directors they will take that lead and make sure those tweaks are done in our position paper. So we acknowledge the government when they do something good, but then we say to the government, but this one you did, have you ever thought of doing it this way? So basically, it was not for us to start writing letter. It's a direction that will take to the board of directors. The board of directors will make decision from there. So just wanted to clarify that so people understand what was happening, what it's all about. It's not for us to start writing the letters. They wanted us to. It has to. When we have in this regional meeting, it's those roundtable meeting is what elevate to the board of directors, and then the board of directors take action. But what can be done is that if this board wants to write a letter, it can write a letter to OPSPR that would be included, and Kerry would know that would include, and that letter would be included in the position paper that go forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Trustee McDonald would like to respond. Take a minute.
Yeah, I'm just going to say too, though, that a trustee suggested that if boards wanted to, and that's why I raised it, because I would, I guess, as a discussion we could have, that I also believe that whereas the Ontario Public School Board Association would write a letter, we as boards could write a letter too, because we're pretty critical of things that occurred. And I'm thinking, if this board is in support of Reg 274, then I think we should give credit where credit is due, and right, because we can't just be saying, you know, that's just my opinion. So we can have a discussion on writing letters after. Okay. But I think boards, it doesn't preclude boards from writing a letter if you want to.
Thank you. So I do have one comment, and that is that Principal Sharon Cool from Louise Arbour was here earlier in support of. Sharon is still here. these eyes can't see that far, but thank you, Sharon, for coming and staying so long. But Sharon was here in support of her new student trustee, our new student trustee in the north, Prebline Nar, who is from Louise Arbour. I understand there were also some of your teachers were here as well in support, and that's a special reminder to your students about how important they are to you. And all of us who know you know that, Sharon. So thank you for your time and joining us tonight and staying this long to hear this recognition, if that's why you stayed. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Item 17 on the agenda is public question period. Are there any questions from the public? Mrs. Soplet, yes, come forward, please. Welcome. And if you can activate that, I can help here. You see a button? There it's on now. Thank you, guys. Just move that down a bit so it's closer to your mouth so we'll all hear. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, I would like to ask a follow-up question to the benefits of writing a letter and changing the way people think.
Sure, go ahead, ask the question.
So the question has to do with something that happened 10 years ago when the government of the city of Mississauga was encouraged by people in the schools to keep a library open. And as a result, new partnerships were formed with different levels of government, and Sheridan Library got a computer resource center. 10 years ago was a terrible time in Canada because just 6 months previously we had suffered from the global collapse. And here we are 10 years later after a bunch of really wacky stuff happened in November 2018. And I just want us to remember that happy memory of occupying a library and what that meant to Sheridan community going forward.
So is the question for us to write a letter?
No, just to
remember.
To reflect and remember
reflect.
that things were dark and horrible and things got better.
Okay, thank you. We will do that. Thank you, Catherine. Mrs. Soplet? Are there any other questions from the public? Thank you. Item 18 is further business. Do any trustees have any further business? Seeing none. Item 19 is the adoption of the in-committee reports. Vice Chair Lawton, will you put them on the floor? Thank you. Trustee Sohi, will you second them? Thank you. All in favor? Thanks, everyone. That carries. And item 20 is adjournment. Ladies and gentlemen, just before we move to adjourn, thank you to everyone here for choosing to participate in public education in Peel. We'll be back here for our next regular meeting of the board on Tuesday, May the 14th. Trustee Benjamin, will you move these? And Trustee Davies, will you second it? All in favor? And it's 2-1 Boston, I think. I don't know. Oh, people are handing me notes here.
My team is winning.
Boston.
Raptors is winning.
Raptors will wipe them out tonight for sure. Orlando's done. Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
Might have that number off the top of his head. I'll get that. Anything else?
Sorry, I just wanted to verify what the 4 or 7 schools was exactly.
Yeah, let me see if I can grab them.
Yeah.
Who those schools are?
No,
Or-
just
the number.
like what it is exactly. Do they still have the book on them or?